I don't think we need Aaron Jones to tell us the real reason he came to Minnesota, because once you take some time to try to understand him, it becomes obvious. Welcome to the Everyman series on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. And if you are new here, hello, welcome. My name is Luke. You can find this show anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. Look it up on any audio listening platform, like SiriusXM, for example. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Today on the show, we are doing the Everyman series, focusing on Aaron Jones. The Everyman series is a series we do on Locked On Vikings every summer where we go over the backstories, personalities, and just trying to get to know the human side of all of the new Minnesota Vikings. There's a lot of turnover every year. There's a lot of new players to get to know every year. And one that everybody is very, very excited about, both inside the building and on this side, on the fan side, is Aaron Jones. But to get to know him, you have to get to know his dad, Alvin Jones. He was a phenom high school running back in Norfolk, Virginia in the early 80s. And in a different world, maybe he would have gotten a college scholarship and, gone and played alongside the likes of Bo Jackson and Barry Sanders and been this really great running back and maybe gotten an NFL career. We would have been talking about a wholly different pedigree. But whether it was recognized and developed and realized or not, that pedigree of athleticism and the work ethic and all that still remains. And it was passed down to his twin boys, Aaron and Alvin Jr. That NFL dream, all that, was never really in the cards for Alvin Sr. He dropped out of high school because he had to work to support his family, and at 19, he joined the military. Said he wanted to kind of see the world and see new things, so he joined the Army, and at a certain point, he ended up stationed in South Korea, met a girl from Human Resources, got married, and they had 4 kids, including the twin brothers. At just 2 years old, the family, both of them got stationed. They would get stationed together, which the military will do for you when you're married. They got stationed in Germany. So the twins, at the very formative age, they learned German. And there is this thing with twins where they'll sort of grow up and affect each other's language. It's just one of those things that only happens with twins, because only with twins, unlike brothers, sisters, friends, anything like that, will you spend so much time around each other that you'll affect each other's language development. And for the twins, they would use German as a secret language, which was kind of funny. Only their mom could understand them. They couldn't find enough tutoring to keep that up, just so neither of them can actually speak German still, but still funny kind of anecdote. And you get all the same little moments that you got in the other stories about twins that we've done on the Everyman series with Gabe Murphy and Shaq Griffin, where they're, conjoined at the hip, basically. They are totally inseparable force. They will go to college together. They'll pick colleges based on which ones they can go to together and sort of be these parallels with each other. Alvin Jr. wasn't nearly as highly recruited or nearly as much of a superstar, of course, as Aaron Jones would end up being, but they will sort of fly through life right next to each other, neck and neck with each other in the way that kind of only twins do. When they were 9 years old, their parents deployed to Iraq. So the boys had to stay in Norfolk with other family. And that was tough for them because they didn't really understand. This was 2003. They didn't really understand the grander politics of why mom and dad have to go to the Middle East. They didn't really have the ability to understand those kind of global big picture ideas. So they were kind of just upset about it. It only ended up lasting a year. And then they would get restationed nearby in Virginia, the parents would, so they could actually be close to family for a little while. And that was awesome because it would have been like 2004, 2005. And that was like the heyday for Michael Vick, Virginia legend, right? And he would like come back and be with the community and sort of inspire kids to be football players and stuff. And you also had front row seats because they would go to high school football games in the area all the time. So they had front row seats to see players like Percy Harvin, who was getting recruited by high schools back then, and Tyrod Taylor, who was one of the biggest quarterbacks in the recruiting cycle at the time. And those guys kind of inspired, especially Percy Harvin. So yeah, if you want a good dig at a Packers fan, know that Aaron Jones wouldn't be Aaron Jones if it weren't for Percy Harvin. You could probably bad faith that if you want it. But he watched Percy Harvin and just how Harvin could score on any play, right? And he was like, I want to be like that. And kind of started to mold and model his game around that. They got a taste too of just the hubbub of it, like just the hype. And, recruiters are here. Oh, this college is looking at them, and how it kind of galvanized the whole community would like watch with bated breath as this player, this superstar became this larger than life teenager, but this larger than life figure. And then they got restationed again. They had to move to El Paso. El Paso would end up being quite an identity for Aaron Jones. But at the start, he didn't really like it. It wasn't like as central. I mean, Texas, huge football state, but that's Dallas, that's Houston, that's San Antonio. In El Paso, you're almost at the Mexican border. So you wouldn't really get the same hubbub. You wouldn't get all that same hype. It was a little bit quieter. But the Jones twins would eventually learn to love it and to think of El Paso as hometown, as like what they would identify as their hometown. In an ideal world, we would live in a meritocracy where the best high school players get to go to the best colleges, and then those are the players that go to the NFL. And if you're really good at football, no matter where you are, we would live in a world where the systems exist that can find you and appropriately sort you into like the right colleges. Like there would be like a Harry Potter style sorting hat that would go, okay, you're a 3-star kid. You should go get a scholarship to Penn State. And, oh, well, you're just a 1-star kid. And, you can go to, a D2 school in your local area. Like if we lived in a perfect world, we would see that, but we don't. So recruiting in El Paso, El Paso is not, small. It's not a farm town. It's still El Paso, Texas. Like it's still a place with a school of its own. But it's a geography problem, right? If you're a Texas scout, if you're an NFL or a college recruiter that is, tasked with finding the best high school football players in Texas, you're not really going to have to go that far from Dallas to find, all the crazy good programs. But despite all this disappointment, El Paso is definitely home for Aaron Jones now, which explains the sombrero thing. That's because it's El Paso, right? Like it's basically Mexico. So he wears a sombrero. It's an homage to his hometown. And when he scores, he'll throw up like 915. He'll still kind of show that honor to where his family is and where he grew up. And while he has that love for it, that doesn't mean that it didn't have an impact on both his and his brother's football careers. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook, and that's because you can get all kinds of very fun deals and find all of the odds, spreads, props that you could ever want. For example, Aaron Jones over-under right now is 725.5. So if you think he's going to be over or under, it's -112 either way. You can go to FanDuel.com right now, and if you sign up at FanDuel.com/LockedOn, you can get $200 back for any winning $5 bet. So you can find, a -1,000 money line in something, and even if you just put $5 down on that and get your 22 cents or whatever that wins you, you can still get $200 back. 40-1 odds. On the shortest odds you can find on the website. You're not going to find that anywhere else. So go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn and sign up. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Minnesota Sports for more traditional Minnesota sports talk, if that's what you're looking for. Without the talking heads, everyone screaming over each other, just good local analysis all day long. 24/7 live stream over there on the YouTube page if you just go to the live tab, so go check that out. On the Everyman series here on Locked On Vikings this year, we've covered two other identical twins, and they both had the same thing in common with the Jones twins, which is that they were going to go to school together. It wasn't a pact. It doesn't sound like in the same way that it was for like the Griffin twins or the Murphy twins, but for Aaron Jones and Alvin Jones Jr., they were going through the recruiting process, and Aaron Jones basically only got local smaller schools, UTSA, UTEP, that kind of thing. And when UTEP, Texas El Paso, gave a scholarship offer to his brother Alvin, they decided, okay, yeah, we're going to do this. So they still kind of ended up in the same place, and they would go to college together. At the University of Texas El Paso, it was pretty clear that Aaron Jones probably should have been at a big school. He went from a sort of under-recruited, unheralded running back to the face of the program. And it seems like El Paso understood that, you know, they'll give a scholarship to your twin brother and they'll give you the family angle, right? And that's nice, right? He got to stay by his family. And to this day, the Jones family is all just incredibly tight-knit. And of course they are, right? They've bounced all over the world together. They, you know, the husband and wife were, mom and dad got deployed to Iraq together. I mean, that will create this unbreakable bond, this just glue that will hold your family together no matter what. And ultimately, it's that bond that helps to prompt Alvin Sr., the boy's father, to retire in the boy's senior year of high school, because he wants to be there for them as they go on this journey of college recruiting, possibly the pro ball. And he sees throughout, like he sees pro ball in these boys from the get-go. He knows that they're going to be the kind of athlete he was. And all of his high school buddies will like tell the kids as they're growing up, like, hey, if you're half as good as your dad was, you're going to be all right. You're going to go pro. You're going to do the thing. There is this like super what could have been vibe around Alvin Sr. And now it's sort of channeled through his kids, who both will ultimately make it to the NFL. And so their senior year, he retires and he's, you know, we're not going to miss a game anymore, which is great when they're in high school, and when they're going to college together at Texas El Paso, very easy to go to all of their games. They're right there. But when Aaron Jones gets drafted to Green Bay, things get a little bit harder. He also declares a year earlier than his brother. So his brother's still playing in El Paso, which means that to see Packers games, they have to go on a Saturday. They have to still be in Texas to see Alvin Jr. play a game, and then they have to go all the way to Green Bay or to wherever the Packers are playing a game and watch that one. And they do. They will not miss a game. This travel itinerary is put together by their mom, Vergas Jones, and Vergas will put together these like crazy itineraries. By the way, she becomes a travel agent later. Just this is like her skill. She's like this type A, like super great at coordinating this whole schedule. And they'll go see every game. That can be kind of frustrating when your kid isn't playing a lot. So it's 2017, and Aaron Jones is getting in spot duty, right? Again, Jamal Williams, he's the main guy. But he's getting in every once in a while, and basically every time he gets in, he breaks something off. He's getting like 5-6 yards a carry, which is a crazy clip, right? Small sample and all that, but it's exciting. And there's this like free Aaron Jones hashtag with, you know, fantasy players everywhere. Everybody wants to see more of this guy, but Mike McCarthy is going with Jamal Williams. It doesn't help that he's starting to get hurt a whole bunch. He's going to start to have this MCL issue. We'll get to it a little bit later in more detail, but he's going to have this MCL issue that just like plagues his whole career. Injuries over the course of it, like there's always some kind of minor injury where he's missing a game or two here or there. He's on a pitch count. He's, you know, always dealing with something, and it'll be it'll be very frustrating. He will hurt his MCL in the second week of his rookie season. And then at the end of that year, it'll crop up again. And that was 2017. Aaron Rodgers was hurt that year, so they were out of the playoffs, so they put him on IR at the end of the season. And then same thing in 2018. He gets hurt at the end of the season. He gets put on. They basically shut him down because they were like out of things. And then somebody else on the Packers, Jay Sternberger, will hurt his ankle. And Jay Sternberger and Aaron Jones have become friends. So he was like, hey, I have this trainer I recommend. Let's work through it. And he would actually have a fully healthy year in 2019. Mike McCarthy was also gone. Matt LaFleur comes in. So there's all of these factors that basically juice everything up for Aaron Jones. Matt LaFleur is going to use Aaron Jones more. He's going to just explode. And this is 2019. This is the 2019 Packers. They go to the NFC Championship that year. They were incredible. They were probably the best team in the league that year, I guess, except for the Chiefs. It was all accelerating very fast for him. His workload was exploding. His production was exploding. He was getting a whole bunch more attention. He had money coming down the pipe. He was in the second to last year of his rookie deal. So like this is starting to be context. His brother, Alvin Jr., in the meanwhile, he finished his career at UTEP and then didn't get drafted, ended up trying to go to Baltimore, and his NFL career never really took off. He would be in the Canadian League, which has a different schedule. So now Alvin Jr. is with his parents going to every game. You can find him anywhere, right? Doesn't matter where, US Bank Stadium, Lambeau, anywhere. You will find the Jones family no matter what. And we're starting as a football watching nation to learn more about Aaron Jones because he's going from just the backup guy you maybe know if you have a deep fantasy league or a dynasty league or something to a genuine bona fide superstar, especially as the Packers go through the playoffs in 2019. And, as they're one of the premier teams in 2019, then you get all the write-ups on everybody, right? And you have a big game in the playoffs and you're going to get the features and stuff. So a lot of the sources for this, there's a phenomenal write-up. I'll link all of this in the show notes. There's a phenomenal write-up in ESPN. There's one that Packers.com did. He did a Players Tribune article himself where he talks about his father and, his relationship to his father and his relationship to his son and how that's kind of affected by his relationship to his father. And just the sort of trials and tribulations of fatherhood and that moment that like every parent, I think, goes through where you realize, oh, this is why my dad did that. I get it now. Once you just kind of see that perspective. He's the Jones family, again, very close and tight-knit. And there is basically nothing that can break them apart except for a global pandemic. When COVID hits, everything changes and everything gets a lot harder. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Aaron's girlfriend, Crystal, gets pregnant at the end of 2019 when all of this other stuff is changing. And they moved back to El Paso when the pandemic hit to try to ride out quarantine. And that was kind of nice to be near family. It was, you're stuck at home, so you have a lot of time with your kid in a way that wasn't really plausible for many people. Like a lot of people who like just had a kid in 2019 were like, yeah, work from home's okay. I can be by my kid, right? And they were kind of making the most of it. And it gave Aaron Jones a lot of time to think about having, conversations with his kid about fatherhood and all that, about having like that conversation. The Players Tribune article he wrote is very much about having that conversation as the father of a black kid and remembering the time that his dad talked about like, cops are going to be different with you, that things are going to be different for you. People are going to treat you differently. And this is why, and having that conversation that like every black father has to have with his son. He thinks about how his dad interacts with his kid, right? With his grandkid. There's this moment that kind of calcifies, I think, in Aaron Jones's brain that he talks about in a couple different interviews where, he hands the infant off and he sees the way that Alvin Sr. just talks to him, calls him little buddy, which is what he used to call the boys when they were kids. And just the love and this kind of dependability, this air of dependability that Alvin Sr. always had. He would be a pillar in the El Paso community, by the way, Alvin Sr., all kinds of community bike ride stuff and all kinds of like just spending a lot of time just trying to like make the community around him better. And that's the way everybody knows Alvin Sr. is as this very dependable, like unshakable guy. And maybe it's the military, right? Like you've been to Iraq, right? Like you've seen worse than this. But everybody has this utmost respect for him. And so it shakes the community to its core. And it shakes the Jones family to its core. when Alvin Sr. contracts COVID early in 2021, and in April, he passes away. People saw him as this eternal, like this invincible guy, this rock, this pillar. So perhaps it is appropriate that Aaron Jones got his dad's ashes put into a little pendant that will be with him basically at all times, and he wears it on a chain. The Packers opened in New Orleans that year in 2021, which is, you might remember, the game got moved due to a hurricane in New Orleans, and it would be this kind of disaster game, this 38-3 thing. There was a little bit of pressure that year, 2021, because at this point, the Packers were defending NFC North champions. Aaron Jones was coming off of a Pro Bowl. He was a Pro Bowler in 2020. They were NFC Championship appearance, NFC runners-up, basically, 2 years running. So expectations were sky high, and then you just come out and you lay this egg. So coming back to Lambeau for Monday Night Football, Week 2, against a very ailing Lions team. This was the 2021 Lions. This was like their basically their tank year, which is a great opportunity for a get-right game, but that doesn't mean that the pressure wasn't sky high for Aaron Jones. And add to that he's going to wear his chain for this game. He's going to wear his dad's ashes for this game. And he absolutely pops off. This is a 4-touchdown effort against the Lions. If you had him in fantasy that year, you won that game for sure. And the story that'll go everywhere from it is after, I think it happened on the second touchdown. If you go back and you watch the highlights, I think you can see it pop off, but he'll lose the pendant in the end zone. It'll come off of his chain. It was just a little like flare out, just a little check down touchdown, right? That as he like fights his way into the end zone, Tracy Walker is like tackling him around the shoulders, and his hand just like gets there and kind of rips down, and then you see this little black thing pop off, and you can see it land right on the goal line. I'm like 99% sure that's when the pendant comes off. It becomes the story of the game. After he gets 4 touchdowns, he'll be interviewing a reporter. He'll be interviewing with ESPN afterwards, and the reporter asks, like, how does it feel? And he's like, yeah, feels great. I actually did this for my dad. I had his ashes on a chain, but I lost the pendant in the end zone. And the reporter's like, do you need to go? Do you need to go get that? Because you lost it? What? Like, you can see like incredulity. You can hear it in her voice. And he says, ground crew said they're on it. And so he actually told the head trainer, Brian Engel, who was the head trainer of the Packers at the time, who will spend hours in the end zone that night looking for this pendant and will eventually find it. He gets a text at 2 a.m. like, hey, I found your thing. And he's really, really emotional about this, even if he recounts the story, a couple months later in another like pregame segment thing with TV. I think it was Fox. And he's really emotional about that. He's like, because like this guy did not have to do that. He did not have to sit there and scour the end zone for hours and hours and hours, but he'll find it. And the Packers will then sew a little pocket into his jersey so that he can put it kind of right by his chest, right by his heart, and it won't get lost again. To my knowledge, he plays with it there every game now. But boy, just doesn't it feel like Aaron Jones just isn't allowed to have success without a caveat? Like, he'd be really good at his school at high school in El Paso, but you're not going to get recruited because you're too far out of the way. And you're going to be really good at UTEP, but you're not going to be seen by the NFL because that's too small of a school. And then you're going to be really good in Green Bay, but you're going to be stuck behind a guy, so it's all going to be tempered. And even when you're scoring 4 touchdowns on Monday Night Football, you lose your pendant, and you still like can't enjoy this success because now there's this black cloud over this whole year of 2021 that's the year that Dad died. It's even the year that he got paid. He would sign a $46 million contract in the 2021 offseason. And then he found himself competing for workload with A.J. Dillon, who they had drafted a year prior. There's still definitely that kind of soreness for fantasy people. Every time they saw A.J. Dillon take a snap from Aaron Jones, they're like, oh my God, here we go again. What is it going to take to get this guy on the field? But Aaron Jones also started to get hurt again. That pesky right MCL crops up again, and he missed a little time there. And I think now is a good time to maybe talk about the injury history, which is part of what goes into the reputation for Aaron Jones, is like this fragile player. That MCL is very much a thing. He's hurt it several times. But then there's all these other little injuries. He's got a hamstring here, and he had a chest injury in the NFC Championship in 2020. All this little minor stuff. But whenever he was on and he was healthy, he was unquestionably one of, maybe even some people would say, the best running back in the league. A lot of that will be bad luck. Some of it might just be genetics. It's always really hard to tell. But you have what you have. And that's, I think, the way that Aaron Jones himself would want me to describe it is what will happen will happen. There is this very go with the flow mentality that is with him throughout all of this. Well, I'm here, I'm where my feet are, and whatever will happen will happen. And I think that is what happens of a kid who is born, bouncing from military bases and going to Virginia and then almost Mexico, basically being in Germany for as a kid. And so when the Packers go out and get Josh Jacobs this offseason and they cut him, he's very go with the flow about it. Like, he's not happy to be cut, right? Like, of course you're going to be a little bit upset about that. Who wouldn't be? But ultimately, the way he talks about it, it's the NFL. You play where you play. You don't get to control where you're drafted. You don't, if it were up to him, he probably would have wanted to be in Dallas or Houston, so he could have stayed close to his family. But no, you're going to go all the way up to the northern part of the country. You're going to play for Green Bay for 6 years or 7 years. I hate to say it, everybody, but this isn't a revenge angle. I know everybody wants that. Vikings and Packers fans alike, I think, really want that to be like fuel on the fire and something they can talk about. But this isn't a revenge angle. He has this quote that will go pretty hard about him wanting to go somewhere where he's wanted. That's the way he says it. But the context of that interview doesn't imply what everybody wants to imply about it. He understands that it's a business. He fully understands the decision that Green Bay made. And he's happy with Minnesota, honestly. And that is, I think, more about Minnesota. And he had kind of caught wind that maybe there would be interest there well before any of this happened. But it's, objectively a great destination for him, right? He gets to be the unquestioned starter, maybe as unquestioned as he's ever been in the NFL. They get to pay him, they're going to pay him what he wanted to be paid and all that. Like, it works out really well for him, completely regardless of Green Bay. And I think when he does go back to Lambeau, when he plays the Packers again, I think he's going to be pretty chummy, to be honest with you. He still likes all the players there and all the coaches that he got to know so well. He has all of those relationships, and ultimately rivalries in the NFL are way more about fans than they are about players and coaches. You'll get some stuff like the Ravens and Steelers that like really hate each other, but even in a white hot rivalry like Vikings Packers, which has been, white hot now basically since Favre. It was nothing before Favre, but now since the Favre era, it has been very much one of the premier rivalries in all football. But it's mostly fans, talking at each other. Players themselves, they do jersey swaps, right? Coaches love each other and talk to each other all the time. Kevin O'Connell and Matt LaFleur are friends. So I don't think that you're going to get like a really big, bitter revenge game. It's just not who Aaron Jones is. Throughout all of these stops, you hear about, he's the most polite player in the locker room. Everybody's yes sir, no sir. Everybody is, he's kind to everybody. There's this story I didn't really have time to about him. There's this tradition for rookies in Green Bay where they ride a kid's bike to practice, and it's like this fan experience where, you're a Green Bay player can like pick your kid, and your kid now lends his bike to like a Green Bay Packers player, and you get to know him. It's a photo shoot, and it's like this whole thing. And he'll like build a relationship with this family that like becomes close friends of his, and it like keeps happening to him. He like kind of keeps doing it because he actually really likes the like community outreach of it. And he's just this like absolutely grade A, everybody loves this guy kind of guy. But even the sombrero, now he's got a purple sombrero for the Vikings, but that was never a Packers thing. It was an El Paso thing. So when he's no longer in Green Bay and now he's doing Minnesota traditions and he's taking that on with vigor and excitement because it's where he is now, I think knowing Aaron Jones, you'd be kind of naive to expect anything else. I'll talk to you tomorrow. It'll be Twitter Tuesday. Get your questions in. There's a Google form in the show notes, or you can send an email to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. I'll send out a tweet as well. I'll see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.